Now, most of the creatures that we talk about on this show are things that are really hard to miss, even in the dense and beautiful world of Subnautica. Usually because they're large enough or dangerous enough that they will in some way inconvenience your life. However, the creature that we will be talking about today is one that many people don't even realize exists in the game simply because of how small and insignificant it is to the overall story. Yet, in spite of all that, it has been a heavily requested video, so here we go. Today, we'll be talking about the Rockgrub. I'll be telling you everything we know about these tiny little creatures, where in the world you can find them, what they look like, what they behave like, and any other interesting points of trivia that I'm able to dig up. Now, of course, before we set off, I have to warn you that this video will contain spoilers from the world and maybe story of Subnautica, so if you don't want to have any of those spoiled and you haven't had the chance to play the game yet, I strongly recommend clicking off this video and coming back to it later. Now, with that out of the way, put your diving gear on, make sure you have a magnifying glass, and let's go. Now, first of all, the Rockgrub is an incredibly tiny fauna species that can mostly be found dwelling in caves and around coral reefs all around the game. It is so tiny, in fact, that it is the smallest fauna species that you can find in the game, and in a lot of situations it can even be hard to see and can be easily missed if you're just looking with your naked eye. Looking at them from the outside, we can see that they have a small green, somewhat shrimp-like body with a circular opening at the front covered in rows of sharp teeth, somewhat similar to the floaters, 5 pairs of lightly translucent green feet, and a larger tail on the back which also gets more translucent as you move towards the end of it. At the front of their body, they also have 2 arm-like structures which supposedly help them to stick to rock walls and corals when they're looking to suck out some nutrients. On top of all that, their body does give off a very light green bioluminescence, which you would think would be kinda dumb in terms of survival. However, the PDA states that this adaptation might be for mating purposes or other specialized processes. Now, in terms of their behavior, these things will mostly just swim around the place, sometimes sticking to rocks and rock walls to seemingly consume even smaller to us invisible organisms that would inhabit these places, and if they are in danger, they are capable of using their powerful tail to swim very quickly in a linear direction. However, because of the chitinous plating that they have on the back of their body, they are somewhat slow to turn, which, if you're someone who's more versed with the lore, should already give you a hint towards what other creature this species is related to. And if you guess sand shark, according to the PDA, you would be very much right, as it states that it might be a distant relative, considering it shares that species' unusual limbs, segmented exoskeleton, and burrowing behavior. Now, if you were looking to find these yourself and you have a keen eye to spot them wherever they may be, the best biomes to look would be the bulb zone, the dunes, the grassy plateaus, the mountain islands, or the sparse reef. However, if you want to be a bit more successful, looking around small cave systems in those areas might yield the best results. Other than that, there aren't really many ways to interact with these things, unless you, of course, want to kill them, in which case, their measly 30 health will not make that a difficult endeavor. Now, that is effectively all that the game tells us about these tiny creatures, and it's not really surprising considering how small and insignificant they probably are to the overall narrative. However, there are a few more interesting points of trivia and theories that I would like to go into just before we end this video off. Now, first of all, if the PDA thinks that this creature is a distant relative of the sand shark, and then we think back to the research specimen Theta also potentially being a relative to the sand shark, it would make it seem like whatever that line of evolution is, it keeps evolving to be smaller and smaller, in which case we could theoretically make the assessment that this creature is relatively new on the planet. However, of course, it might also just be the case that this diverged a while ago, and the sand shark and the Rockgrub simply developed completely independently. On top of all that, considering what I said about the mouth being so incredibly similar to the floater, I think there also might be a solid argument for saying that these things might be distantly related to that species, considering not only their appearance, but also their similar behavior of sticking to things and supposedly sucking out nutrients. Oh, and also, rockgrubs are technically categorized as scavengers and parasites. Now, interestingly enough, way back in development of the early alpha, the Rockgrub was actually referred to as rock puncher larva, which is quite interesting because that would have to mean that they grew up quite significantly to eventually become rock punchers. However, also not impossible considering we know that other species in the world have undergone bigger transformations, like for example the Sea Emperor Leviathan from the juveniles into the gigantic adult specimens. It is, however, worth noting that this was most likely just a temporary thing that eventually got scrapped, as a Trello card that came not long after started referring to them as rock puncher food. It is also technically a small interesting detail that the Rockgrub is the only fauna species with bioluminescence that can actually light up its surroundings, whereas with all the other bioluminescent creatures, the light that they emit does not affect the environment. And finally, and this one is just a real knockoff theory, but the databank does state that, quote, perhaps being eaten is simply part of the Rockgrub's life cycle. And if you think about it, there is one more creature whose life cycle and purpose in this game, and specifically in the core Subnautica, is to mostly just get eaten, and that would be the Peeper, carrying around Enzyme 42, or at least its incomplete version. Now with this in mind, and also the theory video I made a while ago about how creatures in below zero might be alive, perhaps it isn't too far-fetched to say that a super tiny organism like the Rockgrub might perhaps also be capable of carrying some aspects of this incomplete enzyme and spreading it around into the void and into larger creatures which would not be able to get their hands on a regular Peeper. But of course, this is currently not confirmed in any way by the game, and it's all just headcanon. But with that, I'm gonna end the video off, and I hope you guys enjoyed and learned at least something new about the wonderful world of Subnautica. If you liked the video, maybe consider leaving a like, commenting, or subscribing. All of those would be very much appreciated. And if there's a theory that you'd like to cover, or any points that I missed, make sure to leave those down in the comments as well. I would very much be interested to read them. Now with that, I want to wish you all a beautiful rest of today, and I'll see you all in whatever next video I make. Bye bye.